Hi, welcome to my podcast. My name is Mike. I'm just going to be honest and open and upfront right away at the beginning. I'm the kind of person that, especially when it comes to doing a podcast, I want it perfect. But yet, I also want it to be real. I want it to be authentic. And I have tried to record this video dozens of times over the last couple of days. And I've come to the realization that when it comes to being perfect and when it comes to being authentic, I have to choose one or the other. I would sit down and record an episode with a script in front of me, trying my best to make it sound real. Man, it turned out perfect, but in the end, it was not authentic. So then I would sit down and I would try to record one that was just pure authentic, raw and unscripted. And I would get to the end and it would not be the perfect video that I wanted it to be. And so I've decided that if I have to choose one or the other, I'm going to choose real, I'm going to choose authentic. I'm going to choose the unscripted part, which is scary as hell because the kind of person that wants things to be perfect, you lean so heavily on a script, you lean so heavily on a structure, and it's scary when you're out here in the middle of nowhere, not sure what to do next and what next steps to take. So here goes. I'm just going to sit down in front of the camera and understanding that if I want to achieve what I want to achieve in life, the goals and the dreams that I have to learn to just be me. I have to learn to be real. I have to learn to be authentic and not hide behind the fear of not being perfect anymore. So this is going to be very healing and very therapeutic for me. So thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and therapy as I just step out into the scary unknown and try to make a podcast and be open and be real and be authentic and be happy with the outcome even though it may not be perfect. So here goes the introductory video. My name is Mike. I am a former independent fundamental Baptist pastor. I spent 19 years, the first 19 years of my marriage, my wife and I spent devoting ourselves to the independent fundamental Baptist movement, a very toxic and a very high control religious environment. Spent 19 years in it. And after many years of doubting and questioning and deconstructing and reconstructing, in 2019, after 10 years of being a pastor at a little country church in the middle of central Illinois, in 2019, my wife and I walked away from the church, we walked away from the ministry, we walked away from Christianity altogether. And it was one of the most difficult decisions that we ever had to make together as a couple. But it was actually one of the best decisions that we ever had to make because since then, we have been on a path of healing. We have been on a path of self-discovery. We have been on a path of pure, unadulterated spirituality, a spirituality that we are able to define and make personal, healing and spirituality that is not governed or fenced in by any religious book or dogma, text, creed, denomination. It's just open and it's just free, and it's been very beautiful, very healing, very therapeutic, and very, very liberating, very free. It all began when I was a young boy. I was raised in a Christian home, and somewhere between the age of 7 and 10, there were two things that really stuck out at me as a little boy that I believe was very instrumental in beginning to forge a path of questioning and doubting and deconstructing my faith. I remember as a young child hearing the story of Noah and the ark. And crazy enough, it wasn't the mass genocide that shook me as a child. It's amazing how much in religious environments we are so brainwashed into and desensitized into this concept of God destroying the lives of millions of people, innocent people, including innocent women and children. And we just overlook that and justify it and so desensitized to it. It's just crazy. But that wasn't the part that shook me as a child. I remember being taught that God repented of this, his creating man. He repented. He looked out across the world and saw how evil and wicked mankind had become, and he repented. He regretted, changed his mind. Why in the world did I ever create mankind? And I was taught that triomni God, the omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful God. And so hearing this story of God changing his mind, he looks out across humanity and he's like, wow, surprised at where humanity is at this point in the timeline. And he changed his mind. He regrets, man, why in the world, what have I done making mankind? And that idea, that concept really took God down a few notches for me as a little boy. It really made God to be more human than godlike. But as a child, I just continue soaking up these teachings, and I did not pursue that thought any further. I just tucked it away and moved forward. Little did I know, I firmly believe that it was a little seed that was planted, maybe some sort of a slight shift in the timeline, if you will, that would later become a foundation or a catalyst into a full-on deconstruction of my faith. So the next thing that I remember really popped out at me as a child is I was sitting there in church one day, sitting next to my dad. He was sitting to the right. I was sitting on the end, right by the aisle, center aisle there. And listening to the pastor, who's a guest speaker that day, listening to him go into very deep, graphic detail about the crucifixion of Jesus. And anyone that's familiar with the story, how horrific and terrible that story is, and what happened to the Jesus character of that story, and just the blood and the gore and the horror, and the pastor was just doing his best to really paint a graphic and horrific picture. And I remember what he said, though, based on that verse in the Bible that talks about God being pleased or satisfied at the crucifixion of Jesus, being satisfied at the horror that took place. And I remember as a child, that shook me to my core, and I began to cry. I began to cry at that thought, and I remember my dad nudging me, and I looked up at him as he looked down. He says, "What's wrong?" And I remember saying to him, why would God the Father be pleased with what happened, that horrible thing that happened to Jesus? I don't remember my dad's answer, his response to that, but I just remember how horrified I was as a child, the thought of God being pleased, satisfied with this. And of course, as you go on in life and you begin to learn, the concept of the substitutionary atonement theory, and how, blood and sacrifice and how it works in satisfying God and bringing on your forgiveness. And again, you really need to listen to your inner child at being horrified at such a thought, that crazy notion of sacrifices being the key to forgiveness and making God happy, and the shedding of blood is what God, makes God pleased. And that's probably a conversation for another episode, but I really believe that at our core, we're horrified at that thought. It horrifies us. It just doesn't sit well with us, and it definitely manifested itself outwardly that day as a little child. Should have listened to myself. I really should have. But because of where I was and the environment that I was in, so often we are forced to shove our real self, our higher self. We're forced to kind of shove that person into a closet and keep moving forward as that good little obedient robot that we're programmed to be. And that's what I did that day. I just shoved that thought aside, didn't pursue it any further, and kept moving on. So then I get into my teenage years, and that's when I really started to dig deep. I began, I was invited by church leaders to preach at those teen hosted Sunday night services. I began to teach and preach as a little boy in junior church. I began to get the itch to preach. Began to get the itch to teach and to preach. And so, in doing so, I began to study the Bible for myself and um, dig deep into audience relevancy, self-taught, Greek and Hebrew, understanding the cultural relevance of the day, understanding context. I tell you, context is so huge. I think that there'd be a lot of pastors out there that would begin to lose their grip on their congregation if believers would stop taking in and accepting fully what the pastor says on Sunday and going home and simply reading the verse. He preaches from a verse, he or she preaches from a verse, and I would go home and read. Just read. You wouldn't have to go any further than reading the verse before and reading the verse after to realize that how often verses are just taken so far out of context. And so even beginning to study context, Greek, Hebrew, all that research and stuff, again, finding out what I believed, why I believed, it began to unlock this deconstruction of my faith. And I began to question things. I began to doubt things silently. I really didn't begin to speak out until I was in Bible college. I began to propose some thoughts and some questions and some theories. But, you get shot down by the masses in that kind of environment. How dare you question Dr. So-and-so's teachings? How dare you question the senior pastor's teachings? And in that environment, if you're going to survive, sometimes you just got to shut up, keep it to yourself, shove that real you, that higher self you into the corner, and just keep moving on, adapting your identity and behavior to survive in that culture, in that environment. So I did. It wasn't until I got into my adult years, as I began to serve in different capacities as a youth pastor, as a children's church leader, and then as a senior pastor, things, as I continued to study and question and doubt and deconstruct and reconstruct, it just began to unwind for me. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that as a pastor, I had become a snake oil salesman peddling a method of healing, peddling a medicine for a sickness that never existed. And each Sunday I'm up there behind the pulpit spoon feeding the crowd with just enough medicine, convincing them that they're sick, convincing them that they're broken, and then just giving them just enough medicine to survive a few days so they will be hungry and thirsty and want to come back for more the following week. And I came to the realization that I was a doctor, if you will, who had invested my entire life researching the cure for an illness that did not exist. And so now I'm in an environment where I have to continue being a doctor if I want to survive, make money. I have to continue being a doctor, convincing people that they're ill and giving them a treatment for an illness that doesn't exist. And I finally got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. I had people leaving my church for one of two reasons, because I was empowering them to step up above, rise above this narrative of being broken and sick, and understanding their wholeness, understanding their health, understanding the power that they have to navigate through life. And you have actually there were three people in that scenario. There were those that left my church because they wanted to be taught brokenness. They wanted to be broken. They wanted to be, needing some sort of outside help or power to lean on. So they left because they didn't like the message of being empowered and wholeness and that. Then you had other people leaving the church because if you unlock the truth that, hey, you are not sick and you don't need the cure because you were never sick to begin with, then of course they're going to walk away from a person whose sole position as pastor is to provide you some medicine each week. And if you're not sick, then you don't need medicine anymore. And so I lost a lot of people because of that. Empowered them to move beyond needing me anymore, which is cool. I mean, that's a good thing. And then they were the third people in that scenario were those that stayed behind and supported me as a friend. And they liked the words that I had to say, and they stuck around. But I got to the point to where I just couldn't do it anymore. Why am I here anymore? Why am I doing this? The whole idea of being a pastor is to be a shepherd, but these are not sheeple. These are people that, they are their own teacher, their own guru, their own healer. They don't need me. So I needed some time to think. And unfortunately, when I approached my church for a sabbatical, the general consensus was, well, maybe we just need to get a new pastor. Maybe we just need to shut the doors of the church. And for some reason, I knew that was going to go down that day, and I had my letter of resignation in my back pocket, and I handed it to the few people that were there, and I said, look, if that's the way you feel, if you feel that I can't have some time off to rethink what I'm doing, or some time to search and figure out what to do next, before I move forward. If this is how you feel and needing a new pastor, just shutting the doors of church altogether, then it's time. I'm done. It's time for me to move on. And that was in 2019, and that was when my wife and I finally walked away. After doubting, questioning, researching, searching, man, probably a good 30 years, ever since I was a teenager, just digging deep into things, it finally led me to that point of walking away from it all. And so that leads me, we'll just fast forward. I don't want to give away too much. I might dig into some details of some things in future episodes. But fast forward to today, as I'm sitting here in front of the camera before you today. I have learned over the last few years, and am still navigating through this vast, open, beautiful, pathless landscape of learning to laugh, learning to love, and learning to live after leaving the independent fundamental Baptist environment. And it has been a very tough and challenging journey. For so long, you were told how to live, and you were told what you could and could not love, and you were told what you could and could not laugh at. And now I'm here in a wide open environment with no path and no map, no instruction manual, just open to explore myself. It's been fun. It really has. But it's also been a little scary at times as well. And so I know that I can't be the only person out there that has gone through this and is going through this. And so I'm hoping to just share my story and share my musings on how I've been learning to laugh and love and live after leaving my church and my ministry and my religion, in hopes that it will just resonate with maybe one other person, if not more, out there, in help someone else along their journey, along their path, and maybe begin to connect with others out there. And who knows, maybe a natural and organic byproduct of all of this will be community, because again, community has been a huge part of my healing. But it's challenging when you first step out of that scenario and that situation, and your entire world was was wrapped around, your entire world was the community of your church, and now it's completely gone, and you have to start from scratch. So that's why I'm here. I don't plan on debating. That's not my goal. I don't plan on trying to change anybody's minds. I'm really not here to teach you anything new. I mean, if you learn something, that's great. I'm not here to teach. I'm not here to debate. I just want to heal. I want to keep on healing. I want to keep on moving forward. And this is a way for me to just really begin to step out of the shadows and be real, be authentic, and just not be afraid to be me anymore. So I thank you for stopping by. I thank you for visiting. I hope you don't mind the first 15 seconds of my videos are going to have a little bit of crashing waves there, because that always just that's my happy place. It kind of brings me to a place of centeredness and calm, and I'm hoping that, that will just kind of help anyone that lands on my video to have just a few seconds of waves crashing before I sit in front of the camera and ramble a little bit. But I've really enjoyed these last few minutes, just kind of sharing a little bit about myself, and I hope it made sense. I hope it resonates with you today. And my videos are going to be free to watch. At this point, I feel that if anyone wants to comment, just to kind of help protect myself a little bit as I'm being open and honest and vulnerable, I think I'm just going to make you buy me a cup of coffee for anyone that wants to comment on my videos, just because I think that's just going to be a way for me to kind of protect myself a little bit, set some boundaries. Just don't want anyone dropping by and, throwing their religious bombs at me or whatnot. Whether that's a good or bad thing to do, that's just what I've decided to do for my videos. But all of them are going to be free to watch. And I hope that you'll enjoy them. I hope that you'll get something from them. And if you'd like to subscribe, that would be great. But I look forward to talking to you in future episodes. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you for listening and watching.